Evening, everyone. I think we can proceed as we wait for Sandra to join in. She'll be joining us as we go on with the conversation. So I hope on her end she'll not be having internet challenges. You know sometimes how Uganda is and Tanzania is. So she'll be joining us as we go on with the conversation. Karibuni sana to Mwanzo Spaces. My name is Joy on behalf of Mwanzo TV. And tonight we'll be talking about something that has been coming up again and again. I think just before we started this space, I had a brief conversation with Neema, and she pointed out the same thing. This is something that has been coming up again and again in our workspaces, in our timelines, that is. And what we are aiming to talk about is what does it really cost women to be online, and what would it take for women to feel safe enough, to speak in our spaces. But before we get right into the conversation, feel free to share the space retweet so that we can broaden this conversation for our listeners and even among your platforms. So just briefly to explain what we do for those who may not know us. Mwanzo TV, we produce this series called Shangazi Power as one of our core projects that we do. We are an online regional media, but we mainly do special projects that affect the community. So Shangazi Power is basically a docu-series where we sit with women change makers in society. That's across Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And we give this space to these women and allow them to tell their stories. These women, they come from different backgrounds. They come from different social statuses, and they range from community activists to community organizers, artists, human rights advocates and defenders, climate justice advocates, gender equality advocates, and so on and so forth. So we usually interact with women from different age groups, from as young as 18 to some even we have as old as 80 years old. So you can imagine the diverse group that we've created on this community. So some of these stories of these women, you can find them under Mwanzo TV YouTube channel under the playlist Shangazi Power, or you can simply log on to our website. It's still under construction, but that is shangazipower.org. So we also have a separate channel called Mwanzo TV Plus, where our content is purely in Kiswahili, because a large percentage of our audience there is from Tanzania. So if you go on to Mwanzo TV Plus, you'll see that the content is purely in Kiswahili, but Mwanzo TV, we keep it regional. But we still focus mainly on Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. So one of the highlighted issues that we have seen coming up as we've been doing this series, coming from our Shangazi, that is, they're basically speaking one message that, yes, the internet is a powerful tool in getting some work done, yes, but there's also where some of the worst violence happens. And I can, from this conversation, we'll be able to engage and hear what happens on ground. So tonight's space is part of that bigger journey. We want to just pause and reflect and listen to two women who are working every day on this question that we are asking ourselves. How do we make digital spaces safer for women and girls? And not just in theory, but qua ground in real life. And I came across a research done by UN Women, and it stated that between 16 and 58% of women and girls have faced some form of digital violence. That's from harassment and cyberstalking to, non-consensual sharing of images, which we see happening almost daily in our digital spaces. There has also been a recent global survey that found that around 7 in 10 women activists, journalists, and human rights defenders have faced online violence, and about 4 in 10 then experience attacks online or offline linked to that digital abuse. I think probably I can give a good example of a recent case, not really recent, but a case that happened in Kenya. If most of you can remember the case of Rose Njeri, she's a software developer and an activist who built a simple online tool that was aimed to help Kenyans, send their objections to the Finance Bill 2025 directly to Parliament. So simply for that reason, police raided her home. She was arrested and she spent quite a number of days in custody, and she ended up being charged under the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, which was something that caused outrage among Kenyans, even beyond our borders. And of course, in the end, the court said the charges were defective and threw them out. But from that, there was one message that was underlying, and it was left quite clear that using tech to help people speak can come with a heavy personal cost. So tonight, I'm really honored to have these two women with us who sit right at the center of all this work. We have Sandra Kwikiriza joining us from Uganda. Sandra is the founder and executive director of Her Internet, which is a feminist organization that works with women who are structurally silenced. That includes sex workers, women around digital security, online safety, and psychosocial support and research on technology facilitated violence. So Sandra and her team, what they do is she'll give us more, but I'm just giving a brief introduction of what they do. So her and her team, they hold space for women who are often, of course, the first to be attacked and the last to be defended. And then with her, we have Neema Mujesia from Kiktanet. Neema is a certified internet governance officer and a media scientist, and she works as a communications advisor at Kiktanet. So she'll be taking us through what Kiktanet exactly does. And from what I saw and what I've been seeing online is that it's a multi-stakeholder think tank that has been at the center of ICT policy and digital rights work in Kenya for many, many years, which of course includes research and advocacy on online gender-based violence and trainings for women in politics, and of course, women like us in the media. So Neema, I'm already seeing you. Karibu sana. And Sandra, I don't know if she's already joined. I'll just follow up shortly. But karibuni sana. And thank you for being part of this conversation tonight. So let's begin with you, Neema, because I'm seeing you already here. to know from your point of view, because I already mentioned that you're the founder and executive director of Her Internet, which is a feminist organization that works with women who are silenced, including sex workers, and you work around digital security, online safety, offering psychosocial support and research on technology-facilitated violence. And I also had explained to them that you hold space for women who are often the first to be attacked and, of course, the last ones to be defended. So if you can hear me, karibu sana. Briefly, just found yourself around this work around women's rights and the internet.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for your patience while I worked out my technical issues. My name is Sandra Kwichiriza, and I am the founder and current executive director at Her Internet. Her Internet is a feminist tech organization. We do a multitude of things that involve supporting the digital freedoms for women. And as you've already explained, our constituencies are women from socially silenced communities. That means women who are experiencing intersectional layers of vulnerabilities. For example, sex workers, queer women, women living with disability. And in the context of connectivity, women who are in rural areas where there is little political will of the state to develop internet infrastructure. That we experience online. And conversations within feminist organizing and women's rights organizing centered mainly on sexual and reproductive health and rights, land rights, children's rights, etc., which are all very critical issues, but not necessarily on digital freedoms. And yet we were using digital platforms for organizing around these very critical issues. And at the same time, really just existing online, being an everyday tech user, an everyday internet user, made the issue very impossible to ignore, because just by scrolling through this platform, for example, X as just one example of the digital platforms that we exist on, scrolling through X, you will see the kind of vitriol directed at women's bodies, at queer bodies, at anyone who is perceived to be a woman. And so expanding the definition of the violence that we experience overall to include TFGBV felt very urgent. But also, about a decade ago, I attended a fellowship that was led by Defend Defenders by then, called the Safe Sister Fellowship, which was around women's online safety. And that experience really brought it home for me about the uphill battle that women face in reclaiming our voices and spaces online. And from there, this work became inevitable, so to speak. Thank you.
That's a very interesting journey you have there. And from what I'm gauging, even from what Nema shared, your work sits very closely, they tie very closely to each other. And I know you missed the introduction, Sandra, but Nema will be able just to take you briefly through as we go on with the conversation. But Sandra, if I can go back to you again, in your work with Her Internet, you've said some of these women, when they come to you, what are the most common forms of abuse or violence that they describe online, from this threats, as I had said earlier on, people sharing clients' details, hate speech, which is the same we also experience here in Kenya and of course other parts of the world. What does it look like in real life from where you sit?
Thank you for that. So everything that has already been mentioned, I know even if I missed it, it's going to be the same thing I'm going to talk about. As women, we face really a wide spectrum of online abuse. This includes things we've already talked about, like harassment, bullying, online stalking. It involves threats of violence, and these threats of violence could include rape threats, it could include death threats, abuse also including body shaming and slut shaming. Of course, I can't not talk about non-consensual sharing of intimate images, which we are seeing at an all-time high now, right? Because everyone has a camera in their hands. Anyone who owns a smartphone literally has a camera in their hands. But also tech advancements have made it so that cameras can be embedded in almost any smart device. Then there's also cases of doxing. Doxing is where someone's personal information is shared, for example, government names, age, maybe your location of home or work, or something like that. So existing online as a woman is already difficult. But when you add intersecting layers of vulnerability, like I mentioned, the harm becomes more frequent and more severe. Sex workers, for example, face intensified slut shaming and violations of their privacy and consent because people assume by the fact that someone identifies as a sex worker, it's a free pass to their bodies, to their personal space, to their privacy, infringement on their consent. And it also gives them, they assume it gives them a free pass to call them all sorts of names, which is not limited to calling them a slut or any other derogatory terms. And then queer bodies obviously endure a lot of homophobic abuse, a lot of threats, including rape threats for queer women, where we see, men telling them that, oh, they haven't been with a man properly. And so, they kind of impose this kind of threats and abuse onto queer bodies. And obviously, a lot of non-consensual sharing, image sharing, which could also be brought about by offline relationships that go sour, whether it's intimate relationships, whether it is friendships, whether it is family, or someone that knows something about you and they feel like this is one way of getting back at you, but it's really online abuse. And then activists or women who are outspoken about various things against the status quo are often targeted simply because they are challenging the status quo. It's like being outspoken or being an activist or being like a young woman in politics, let's say, is like having a target placed on your back. However, the point I'm making here is that intersectionality matters a lot. Those with multiple marginalized identities experience compounded and more dangerous forms of harm, especially in the absence of social protection. So, for example, where we have contexts such as ours that have state-sanctioned violence and discrimination against queer women, there is an obvious absence of social protection from friends, from family, from your boss at work, from your neighbors at home, that compounds the harm that online abuse experiences looks like for these groups. So everything that everything that we talked about around the different forms of online abuse, when it comes to particular communities of women who already have other layers of vulnerability, it is more compounded. Slut shaming for someone who is perceived or identifies as a sex worker is more compounded because it is, for lack of a better word, right in their face. Or, for example, homophobic abuse for queer women is more compounded because it's not just an abuse, it's an attack on their identity, it's invalidating their identity. And so that's how intersectionality plays, gives a different perspective to the kind of abuse that structurally silenced communities of women experience.
Thank you for that, Sandra. Nema, I think from I would also like to understand from your point of view. I know there's a very thin line, but if you look at online GBV in Kenya, Sandra has touched on, activists and politics. But if you look at that, especially around women in politics, journalists, and generally young women in public life, what patterns are you seeing? Do you share the same sentiments as Sandra on this?
Yes, thank you so much, Joy. I actually do, and this is something that we've seen over time, because for us at Kiktanet, we started this work a very long time ago in 2016, where we did our first major research on the dark sides of ICT, focusing on what women face. And through this, we were able to collect a lot of data. So one of the things we realized is a lot of data is not being recorded, and a lot of harassments are not being recorded, which I'm going to explain briefly. Now, at Kiktanet, something that we also see is during our research, we've run a lot of training sessions to ensure that the women stay safe online and resilient by providing tools like our OGBV tracker and Swahili tip line. And this is in line with, the various harassments they're facing online. And something also we've seen is we are looking into AI and emerging technology. Sexual harassments and coordinated trolling, especially gendered hate speech. And through our work, we've trained a lot of women, especially in politics and journalists spaces. Also, we need to understand that gender does not exclude men as well. So that is something that also we should consider. But now we are looking at who is marginalized more. Now, simply put, these terms that I've stated are patterns where women are insulted, and we've seen this when we were training women, especially the activists. You'll find that there's this friend of mine, I will not mention her name, a very strong activist. She was being followed to the house, being, threatened. She even had to stay in a cell for some time just because she's advocating for these rights. So there's a lot of violations and exposed images which are deliberate in these groups of women, and these are done in ways that intimidate them, and also it damages their reputation, and it therefore pushes them away from the digital space. Now, key thing is that it does not stay online. So this brings me to one of the reports that we did. It's called Unmasking Trolls Online, where we figured out that what happens online can go offline and what is on offline can go online. If I can explain briefly, is that a lady might meet somebody in public, they exchange contacts, and that has they met in public, so that is an offline that has gone online. Or some ladies are meeting men through the online platforms, so it starts from an online perspective to the offline. So this not only affects them physically, but also we've seen through our work, it affects them also on mental health, it affects their careers, it affects also their safety, and also it makes them lose their confidence to be able to speak. Now, when women are silenced online, there's also silence in the society. Now, this is not just about celebrity or politicians. We've seen in the recent uptake of the media, what you're getting on social media, ordinary women are also experiencing this in this very day. Now, I just want to highlight why women are targeted, because this is a very important point. Women aren't targeted simply because they are online. That is one thing you should know. They are targeted because digital spaces mirror offline inequalities, where we see there is backlash against outspoken women. There's also the double standard where men are called bold and women are called disrespectful. And there's also the issues of anonymity, where the perpetrator is, protected through anonymity of these digital platforms. And also there is the issue of coordinated attacks meant to intimidate these groups of women. So now women in politics, the journalists and activists, face these abuses every day, and simply because they are visible. Now, you cannot attack something that is not visible, but this doesn't mean visibility. We've seen that visibility is increasing and vulnerability, but that shouldn't be the case. So just to highlight a bit more on what we've been doing to address these issues, is we've done a recent publication called Addressing Technology Facilitated Gender-Based Violence, looking at the legal landscape and policies, because we saw that even if you report, how under which laws do these attacks fall under. So we needed to look at the key frameworks to see how the law, how the public and law enforcement are even made aware of these issues. What are these challenges that survivors face, and how are they reporting them online? So the key things that we saw is stigma. There's a lack of trauma-sensitive response. There is also limited investigations and capacity, and there's difficulties in evidence, especially for prosecution. Was the issue of data. Now, something that is really relevant right now, data has become the new law, and that the new oil. And that being said, is that without data, without proper reporting mechanism, these issues that I've just mentioned are not going to be addressed as they should be. Thank you. Back to you, Joy.
Thank you so much, Nema. Actually, you have broadly explained. I like the way you've put it out, how Kiktanet is responding. And just to bring it back, it really ties in so much what we've been hearing during our interviews, our Shangazi Power interviews, of course, across the region. Women often share how they're feeling the weight of the online attacks, but they're also slowly just finding organizations like yours to help them, make sense of it and push back. It's very encouraging to hear how deliberate that work is for you on your end, from, the trainings to the publications. And I'd also like just to hear from Sandra how her internet is responding, and just to highlight how women are pushing back and building safety for themselves. Sandra, probably her internet, if you can describe just the same way Neema has taken us through what KICTANet is doing, to highlight how they're responding. What is her internet actually doing for these women who are facing the online violence? How would you describe it?
Yes, thank you for that. So one of our core interventions at Her Internet is offering digital security support, both at individual level and at organizational level. So at individual level, we do host capacity building and training workshops on digital security with, with various community members across Uganda. At individual level, yes, and we impart important tips, knowledge. We share experiences, within the group. We create spaces where these conversations are really impactful. And so it's not just about providing digital security support, it's about also building safe spaces or allowing community to build for themselves affirming digital spaces where, people can come together to learn, to share, to resist, even in a context such as ours, where visibility itself means putting a target on your back. Then we do equip graphic mode, there are toolkits, brochures, etc. And they are accessible on our website and across our social media pages, so that people can keep referring to them, even if we are no longer in active dialogue with them. And we also do give ongoing digital support tips across our social media pages every day, Monday to Friday. There's something we're talking about across our social media pages. And so that kind of building knowledge and building political consciousness is at the core of what we do, because also we recognize that digital security is a journey. So we meet people where they are at. We don't come in, wearing the hat of experts and doing the teacher-student kind of conversations. We meet communities where they are at, where we are willing to hear from them, hear from their experiences, and then offer support accordingly. Just like KICTANet, we also do conduct a lot of research. I already mentioned two of our most successful research studies has been one on the impact of TFGBV on communities of socially silenced women in Uganda, where we really explored the kind of impact that TFGBV has on communities at individual and collective levels, physically, psychosocial aspect as well, on their careers, family relations, and all that. And then our most recent piece of research is around the influence of social media algorithms on the kind of content that we consume, but also overall on community organizing and movement building, where an interesting tidbit, just really quickly, was around how algorithms are also pushing anti-gender narratives. And if we did not build this kind of political consciousness across Uganda, probably that small thing might have slipped by without being noticed. And so these pieces of research not only create a body where we can say, here are our experiences as women on existing online, but there are also bodies of pieces of advocacy that we move with when we are doing work around contributing to global conversations around digital rights, around feminist conversations, and ensure that our voices are heard and not just staying at the margins. So when we convene dialogues on different topics, maybe AI, online harm, digital literacy, etc., we sustain these conversations beyond our immediate circles, which for us is also essential because we are a very small team at High Internet and we can't possibly be everywhere. But at least when these conversations are sustained, even when we aren't in the room, it means that communities can self-organize and better reach their advocacy goals. So, of course, even as we do all this, we are faced with the daunting fact, which is that there is limited political will from the state to support this work. And so we have to rely on fellow CSO actors or, feminist actors who are aligned with our objectives and can see the goal that we are trying to reach. And overall, hitting of our goals and ensuring that our structurally silenced women are able to exist online safely without fear of harm, without fear of, being targets of online harm, which is still an under-addressed issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. I'm glad you've highlighted there's that human side of the caring and the safe spaces. It's not just tools and policies. It's a good reminder that safety is basically like a circle, a room, people who actually listen. And I agree with you. Yes, sometimes it's not just individuals attacking. It's the way, these platforms are set up to amplify hate and confusion around gender. It makes the work you're doing even more urgent. You also mentioned about how tech affects the environment. It's very good to amplify that as well, because it's important to note that even as we talk about safety online, sometimes these systems also have a cost on the offline world that we are living in. But there's something you've mentioned, so if you allow me to put both of you a bit on the spot right now, when you look at the way platforms and governments are responding right now, Sandra, you've mentioned you rely on CSO actors, but to both of you, do you feel women in our region are properly protected from digital violence, or are we still leaving most of the burden on survivors to fix these things themselves?
enough, not even the bare minimum. Because, and I know Nema made this distinction around there are no more boundaries between the online space and the offline space. So sometimes violence starts off online and seeps into our offline lives. Sometimes the violence starts offline and comes onto online spaces. However, the platforms that we exist on, these digital platforms on which most of this violence is happening or starting from or ending up on, um, are not taking accountability for their role, right? Because these platforms are designed and governed by those big tech corporations. So their policies, their design, the algorithms that they have built on these platforms are the ones that really shape our safety and our visibility. So without them taking accountability of that and without stronger commitments from them, then the structural change that we are looking for is really out of our reach. The structural change to really recognize online forms of harm as serious as they are. Therefore, platforms need to invest significantly. They need to invest a lot of resources in more effective content moderation systems. And even if I pause at that, content moderation right now already is a shaky table because of their working conditions that content moderators, who are mainly women, work under. I know there's several content moderation sites in Kenya, for example, but they are handed over to third-party institutions to handle. And so, for example, if they're doing content moderation for Meta, then Meta has no liability with the kind of working conditions they are working in. So that is already a sore topic on its own. However, platforms need to invest more effectively in content moderation, whether it is content moderation by humans or by AI models that they are building. Content moderation needs to be context aware and also needs to take into account the language of that particular context, because what we see is that most times abuse abuse or captions that are very abusive, that are written in local languages, rarely get flagged as abusive because the content moderation systems that these platforms use are not yet incorporating context specific they're not embedding context-specific systems within their hardware. So at least in content moderation, the platforms need to really invest more significantly. Then reports of violence also need to be handled urgently. So sometimes you report a page or report a post. You'll even ask your friends and strangers online to join you in reporting the post or reporting the page, but it's not handled as urgently as the harm that the victim or the survivor is experiencing in the moment, right? And even then, the way that these reports of violence are handled is not transparent. So there is no clear communication to the survivors about the actions taken. It's very generic. Yeah, this page has been taken down or this post has been taken down, but there is no direct communication to the survivors to say, can we get some more information about what this is, even as we suspend this page, so that they can take more severe actions. So there must be more accountability, more transparency around how these digital platforms respond to the abuse, how they remove harmful content, and how they enforce their own community standards. Because as the end users, we are expected to read all that whole document of community standards and guidelines that they put, in very tiny fonts that we just skip and agree to the terms and conditions, but that's not really doing enough. It's just the bare minimum or even less than bare minimum. For states, on the other hand, especially for us in the region, we face a problem of having great laws and policies on paper around computer misuse, around data protection, privacy, around violence. also advance to that level that that tech is advancing, because all these things combined make survivors face long periods of no meaningful redress or outcomes, and also re-traumatizing processes, because the processes don't take into account care for the survivors or the victims who are experiencing this type of harm. So the states are complicit and the platforms are also complicit. They're not doing enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Before I open the platform for our listeners to join in, feel free to ask a question. You've pointed out two major things: that the states are not doing enough, and platforms don't invest in proper content moderation for our context. And yes, it's true. If you look at it, the way you've just mentioned, if abusive language in our own languages is not even picked up as abuse, if reports of violence sit for days or are not attended to, or you come back, with generic replies, then we're basically telling women to go ahead and, protect themselves. We say in Kiswahili, wajipange, inside the rigged game. I'd also like to hear from Neema, from where you sit at KICTANet. Does this match with what you're seeing? What would a serious response from these platforms and government actually look like in our region?
Thank you, Joy. I like to disagree with my speaker, because one of the things and one of the statement quotes that we live by is technology gives us the tools, but we are the builders of the future. That is one thing we need to understand. And I'll speak from a Kenyan perspective, because we have been doing a lot in terms of even KICTANet itself. We do all these capacity building exercises. We do the research in order for these issues to be taken up by the big tech organizations. And one of the things that I can mention is where the government has recognized that online gender-based violence is part of violence. That is something. Being part of, they have recognized women, they have recognized girls who are being harassed. And this is being done by the National Gender and Equality Commission, NEG. They are recording incidences of TFGBV and using digital platforms to do so. That is one thing. The second thing I can talk about is the framework that we have for abuse, which is the Computer Misuse and Cyber Crimes Act 2018 that penalizes cyber crimes and online. And now we do have courts that have increased recognitions of GBV offenses and are recognizing it in a way that it is also committed online. So these are some of the things that the government has been able to do in partnership with civil society such as KICTANet. And there are ongoing calls for more civil societies and government actors for stronger enforcements in terms of inter-agency coordinations, better digital literacy. And this is why, as I mentioned earlier, we're a multi-stakeholder think tank. So we do a lot of stakeholder engagements that are equitably in place and structured to be able to relate to the real world accountability to maintain safety of women online. And why am I saying this? But, the challenges still remain. The laws are not always understood, as Sandra has mentioned, that some of this just to be compliant, to the online platforms, it's not easy. Digital violence like cyber stalking and image of exploitations go unreported because, the women feel, the real consequences will lie with them, and the perpetrator will go free. Now, something that KICTANet is doing also, we have developed lexicons in 6 languages, and these lexicons are to describe those languages that you're talking about, which the big tech cannot be able to take. So we've done it in 6 languages: Agikuyu, Ateso, Luya, Luo, and through these languages, now we've developed a document that the big tech can be able to use and source. This document specifically highlights the insults that are happening online, so in those various languages. So that is a step forward. Yes, protection exists and the government justice system recognizes it, but the reality sometimes we've seen on the ground that women still don't fully feel safe. And Kenya is still building. It's building stronger systems. We are building enforcement. We are building support. And that's why we will continue to do these works and ensure that, this is safe. And one of the things I saw during our recent engagement is that the Kenya Justice of Law system are now taking these cases online, and they're actually drafting the constitution is now actually online. These are some of the steps that are being taken in terms of ensuring that there is development and the women also feel safe. And in terms of the initiatives that we are doing, especially to the grassroots, the women in the grassroots and building resilience. There's a project we did last year, it's called Strengthening Digital Communities. And this year we are doing Enhancing Digital Communities Access and Resilience. This is in order to build, because you cannot tell me you're giving technology to people and they do not know how to use it, and then when there's a fault you will blame the same people. There needs to be a building of resilience in the grassroots level, which we are currently doing in the 8 arid and semi-arid counties, and this will strengthen response and pathways to ensure that these women also find their way to building. Safety starts with you. If you decide today I am going out in the middle of the night and you're just walking around, of course you'll meet a thief or you'll meet somebody bad. But if you say I'll be home by 6, lock my doors, so safety always starts with you. It's that simple. But because policy conversations must be done, it must be connected to real people. Yeah, so that is my response. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Nema. I think from what I'm getting, that's where the tension sits. Yes, we have the tools. We have some laws. We even have the documentation, as you have brought out, what you're doing on your end. And as you've generally said, still many women don't feel safe enough to use their voice. But probably the real question is, what is missing between what's on paper and what women actually feeling on the ground? There's a gap, and how do we bridge that gap so that all this good work and policies and documentation that we are doing actually translates into real safety? And now that we are actually speaking to what, as we call them, shangazis, and the younger women and people who follow both of our platforms, that is, of course, Kiktanet, Mwanzo TV, Her Internet. Sandra, if a woman comes to you right now and says, I'm being attacked online for one reason or the other, and says, I don't even know what to start, what would you tell her? What steps, practical, simple steps, would you advise her to take? And then Nema, I'll also jump to you with the same question. What are some simple, effective things that you'd wish more women and girls can do to protect themselves online? Of course, aside from what you've said, ukitoka nje, you'll be attacked at this time and this time, but more practical tips that you wish women would do more to protect themselves effectively. I'll start with you, Sandra, sorry.
Thank you, Joy. The issue with online harm, or TFGBV in general, is that once the harm has started, or once it is ongoing, or once someone is experiencing some sort of online abuse, what is the saying? It's already happening. You can't undo it, right? You can't undo it. But what you can do is stop the spread of that harm. It's like when a fire breaks out, what you can, even if the fire has burnt one or two things or scarred one or two things, what you can do is stop the spread of that fire. So the first thing would be to strengthen their digital safety, which would be, first of all, muting the harasser if it is a comment, if it is someone who is tagging them, if it's someone who, is commenting on their post or something like that that is within your control, you mute that person so that their vitriol does not spread further beyond the people who have already seen that abuse online. So you strengthen digital safety in terms of strengthening your passwords. Maybe that you might need to change the password to your account in case maybe someone has access to your account without your consent, without authentication. And then the other thing is because we respond to harm differently. So sometimes some victims or survivors are not in a position to even exist on that platform where the harm is happening. So it's important to have a support system, a friend, or someone who can log into your account in that moment and do these things for you so that you don't have to be re-traumatized by the harm you've already experienced and seen. So some of us are not that strong to still exist on these platforms and implement all these digital security protocols as the harm is ongoing. So that's where the support system comes in handy. In my experience, some people, especially women who are in activism or who are very vocal, want to engage with the person. So sometimes it's a case of bullying, and being silent might not really support your cause. So those who have the energy to respond back to the abuser sometimes do, because what happens is that what I also want to bring into the space here is that TFGBV, or cases of online abuse and online harm, are not only individual experiences. So we can't talk about TFGBV and only talk about individual experiences that, Sandra is experiencing cyber harassment as an individual. Sometimes these cases of TFGBV are actually experienced collectively. In cases of, let's say, disinformation campaigns, right? Even if it is a disinformation campaign targeted at a particular woman, at maybe Sandra, for example, other young women or other women who would want to be as vocal as Sandra is witness the kind of violence she's facing and therefore disengage. So it is very important to have, on the battlefield, there is people who do things at the front line, in the middle, and at the back line. There's people who are cooking food. There's like a medical tent somewhere. So it's important to recognize all forms of response as valid, depending on who has the energy to go that extra mile, or who is more comfortable, stepping away from the scene and letting someone else handle it. Because we want to avoid a situation where those who witness violence happening to others that they wish that who inspire them are silenced or withdraw from public discourse, civic participation, etc. So there is different ways that we support victims of abuse, depending, because like I mentioned, we meet people where they are at. We don't come in with solutions without listening to the person who is experiencing the harm. So in my experience, some people want to go toe-to-toe with the abuser, publicly or privately. Some people want to disengage for the moment and heal in quiet and then figure out the next steps. Some people want to go the legal route, even knowing that getting justice in our context is very difficult. But some people are saying, you know what, I want this on record, that I recorded a police case. It probably went to court and this was the verdict, if at all that process is done. So we really meet people where they are at. But the first thing is digital security, implementing digital security protocols to ensure that at least your accounts are safer, and no one will access them without authentication. And then we offer psychosocial support, which is another very important layer of support for victims and survivors of violence, because sometimes the online harm has far-reaching consequences beyond you as the individual who is experiencing the harm. For example, victims of non-consensual sharing of intimate images face lifelong consequences where there is there's fracturing of friendships and other relationships, fracturing of family ties. They might lose their jobs or their sources of livelihood. And so in that case, then there is an extra layer of ensuring that they receive psychosocial support. Now, at Her Internet, we don't offer psychosocial support in-house because we don't have the expertise, but we do offer referrals to organizations and service providers who offer this kind of support, taking into account that it is online harm, because many times online harm is it's very insidious. The person experiencing it is the one who knows exactly what is going on. Feelings of shame, feelings of guilt, in cases where it is like body shaming, feelings of feeling inadequate, feelings of feeling like your identity is invalidated. And so psychosocial support comes in really handy. And then we don't just stop at the initial point of contact. You have to keep checking in on this person with follow-up support, follow-up check-in to ensure that maybe they're adhering to the digital security protocols that you had agreed to, or maybe to check in whether the psychosocial support is working, whether it's not working. Sometimes people who disengage in the beginning later on get fired up and say, you know what, I think I want to fight this thing. So we meet people where they are at. But first and foremost, digital security support and psychosocial support. Thank you.
Thank you. Neema, what about on your end?
Thank you, Joy. First of all, one thing I'd like to say to all the women who are here and all the girls, also the men, you belong online. The solution to digital violence is not for women or people who are in the marginalized communities to withdraw. It's for systems to improve, accountability, to, as Sandra mentioned, to increase, community and communities to show up, because you'll need the community. So some of the practical steps that we do advise women is to report, and we have a Swahili tip line which I can be able to share with you, Joy, whereby we receive cases of online abuse, and through these cases we can be able to put in place accountability for these big techs and show them the urgency of this matter. Something else we have done at Kiktanet, we are tracking these cases, and a practical example is that this tracker we have is very simplified for any user. So even our mama bloggers can be able to use this system. So simplifying of systems and making them practical is one of the steps we have done for women who need this support. Another thing is we've handled women in politics, and we do have the women that we handled some time back. They are the women who had lost in politics. So you know what that means. They were facing a lot of harassments online. And through one of our curriculums on tackling online gender-based violence, we have one of the women who has now opened her own CBO, and she's running it in a way to say, I face this type of violence, but through this curriculum, this simplified curriculum on tackling OGBV that was given to me by Kiktanet, I'm certified, I'm a certified trainer, and I can train my fellow women. So that is part of empowering the community. Something else is, through this community, it creates what we call the trusted groups and trusted forums to ensure that the women are moderated and they stay safe. Another thing is you need to stop, think, and check. Even if you're going to respond to the person who's insulting you, think, is this response, stop first, and then you think, is this response worth this person? And then you check, what does this response mean when I do it? So stop, think, and check. in case you want to retweet anything, in case you want to share anything, in case you want to respond to an issue online, that is one of the measures we encourage women to use. Another thing is to be mindful of what you post. Your personal information being posted online, and online is now the new public. So what you are posting online, you have to be very mindful. Another thing, as she mentioned, blocking the person is not the only thing that you can do. You also have to report, capture the data. As I mentioned earlier, data is the new oil. Capture the data, report the account, because by blocking them, you give them room. You give them room to continue intimidating the next person. But when you report, and when the platform, I've seen it work, it gets 5 reports, that account is usually taken down. Okay, so these are practical steps. We tell people to change passwords, but do we ask ourselves how often or when do you change your password? So the best place and best timing to change your password is in the duration of 3 months. You have to change your password. It's something in Kiktanet we do, which is called cyber hygiene. So ensuring that you do a lot of cyber hygiene, we say the same way you wash yourself every day, you clean your house, is the same way you should be cleaning your digital environment. So these are just some of the practical steps we have. And another thing, we do have an upcoming webinar on to ensure that we continue these conversations, and webinars, capacity building exercises, we've seen them work. So we have an upcoming webinar called Open Hearts and Open Mics, which is happening on the 25th of this month. And here we are going to discuss a lot on these issues that women are facing, especially in the love sector, because this is a love season. And by continuing with these engagements, we are giving women platforms to where they can be able to speak. And through these initiatives, we are ensuring that the double-edged sword that we are facing right now in terms of the use of social media, because some people are saying social media is amazing, others are saying I'll never go back there. So we are trying to ensure that there is what we call a proper digital intimacy when it comes to the use of tech. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for sharing, even the basics of how to just protect yourselves, because I like the way you brought out that silence doesn't protect you or your cause. You just need to act. Silence just hides the problem. And if you don't act on it, then you're not going to get, help from whatever is happening. Even the basics like securing your accounts and being careful, especially being careful about what you share, because in this day and age, we've seen so many people being vulnerable just because of their social media accounts. And of course, this content with the individuals, we need the systems that are accountable and communities that report. So in a nutshell, yes, take care of yourself, but also keep pushing for the wider system to do better. That is what we have gotten from both our speakers. And as we start to wind up our conversation, I know it's a Friday, end of the week, many people are tired. And just let me throw it back to you, Sandra. I want to give you space probably for a final word. What is that one thing you wish people understood better about online violence against women? What message would you leave to that young woman or girl who's listening and feels afraid, but still wants to use her voice online?
I think I'm going to pick off something that Nima said around we belong online, but also we need to understand that violence online is just part of the continuum of violence offline. So if there is offline abuse that you can imagine, best believe it also exists in some form online. However, we don't, when you wake up in the morning, you don't wake up saying, oh my God, I might be hit by the bus, or I might be, God forbid, terrible thing is going to happen to me. And that's the attitude we need to move with also online, because silencing ourselves or disengaging from digital platforms means that your voice is not going to be heard, your perspective will not be positioned, you will miss out on engaging in civic and public discourse. And this is even the few of us who have access to online spaces, to digital platforms to take, because very many people, very many women and men across the region do not have access. They are not connected. So for those of us who are connected, the onus is on us to ensure that we exist online, because existing online is also resistance. Just saying, you know what, I'm not going to let this violence that happens online that I've witnessed drive me off is resistance. And then the other thing is, I know this has been a largely grim conversation around violence online, around whether it's safe enough to speak up, around, as women who are speaking truth to power, we have to watch our backs, we have to watch what we say, we have to watch what we post. But being online does not mean that we only have to think about the perspective of violence. We need to reclaim pockets of joy, pockets of pleasure, pockets of fun that are online. Disorganize the algorithm if it's bringing you content that doesn't bring you happiness. Join groups or engage with content that is uplifting, just so we are not constantly in this cycle of, oh my God, online is not a safe space or what. And then the other thing is there is feminist tech actors, such as myself through her internet, such as Kiktanet, Mwanzo TV doing the media part, and other CSOs and other feminist actors who are doing all we can in our part to ensure that online spaces are safe for everyone to express their opinion without fear. Of course, taking into account that you also don't have to infringe on other people's human rights just because you have freedom of expression and speech online. But there is so many actors who are working tirelessly to ensure that online spaces are safe, who are working hand in hand with big tech. High Internet is doing a lot of knowledge production and resources developed around online safety. Kiktanet is also doing a lot of things. So being online should not scare us, because I remember a few years ago on Ugandan X, then it was Ugandan Twitter, there's a group of like 5 feminists, young feminists, who decided to take up the mantle and do the work of dismantling the patriarchy that is pervasive in online spaces, particularly on X as a platform. And they did that work under so much violence, constant scrutiny, surveillance, stalking, abuse, harassment, etc. But the work they did years ago has paved the way for more young women now on Ugandan X to be vocal about even issues that are considered, private issues. For example, the right to safe abortion for girls and women, bodily autonomy, issues around speaking out against sexual assault and sexual predators. But the young women who are safe, who feel safe enough to speak on X now, on Ugandan X, are used those women's experiences and background and work as a stepping stone. So there is so many actors who are working tirelessly to ensure that online spaces are safe. Seek them out. Seek out pockets of joy, pockets of fun, pockets of pleasure online, to also disorganize the monotony of just constantly thinking about online spaces being harmful to us, because we belong here. We are all users of technology. We all want to be connected, and we all want to enjoy our freedom of speech and expression without fear of repercussions and violence. So don't let it stop you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Nema, same question to you.
Thank you, Zoe.
What do you wish more people really understood about women's experiences online, and what would you tell, that young woman or girl who feels afraid? What would you want these platforms to understand better about online violence against women?
Do not be afraid, first of all. Digital spaces, what I'll say, digital spaces are real spaces. That is one thing we should know. What happens here matters. whatever we even do after here, after this express, whatever you go like, whatever you go share matters. So the internet is full of opportunities to learn, to connect, and to create. And in the projects that we are doing, even at KICTANET, we are empowering the communities. As I said, in the ASAL counties, where now they are going to, get online jobs and so step online with confidence as a woman, speak your voice, also support others. When you see a woman is being trolled online, do not get in the same line and continue trolling her. Try and report it. Reporting only takes less than 3 seconds. Report the incidents, but your presence here even matters. Just that we are having this conversation here matters. And I like to encourage people to continue in engaging in such conversations, like the Mwanzo TV has provided a safe enough to speak X space. So let's continue speaking about it. It can never stop. Let's continue speaking on it as a stepping stone, as just Sandra has mentioned. And creating safer digital spaces environments is not just a responsibility of women, is the responsibility of us all. We can see in this X space, we are not only women, we are men, there are men, and there are different people who are here, who are from the policy makers, from the platforms, from the communities, and the users as well. Let us be resilient. KICTANET, we are continuing to work to ensure that digital spaces remain safe through research, through our trainings, and through the tools that we use, like I mentioned, the Swahili Tipline and OGBV tracker. And the digital world is full of opportunities to learn, to connect, and to create, just as I've mentioned. And one word I can say as a parting shot is mtandao salama ni jukumu letu sote. In English, it means a safe internet is everyone's responsibility. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. I really like how both of you have fueled this conversation and given us a reminder that even when we silence ourselves, we simply hand over the conversation to others and we end up locking ourselves out of the public life. And I really like what you also mentioned about existing online. I don't know. I think it was you. Remind me if it was you, Neema or Sandra. You said something about existing online itself it's a form of resistance, and I agree. Especially for women, even the women we deal with, the activists, the queer people, the sex workers, anyone who has been threatened or forced or being told to disappear. I believe just choosing to show up, to share your work, as Sandra has brought out, to laugh, to learn, to connect, that itself, it's saying, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. And that balance is very important. Yes, step online with confidence. Yes, make it a fun space, but also remember that, as you have said, Neema, digital spaces are real spaces, and what we do there matters. It's very careful to, it's very important to be careful on the way we communicate online. And as you have said, freedom of expression doesn't mean you trample on other people's rights. And for everyone listening, I hope you carry that with you. Protect yourselves, as we've been told, support others, don't disappear. And also, most importantly, enjoy the opportunities that the internet gives us. As Neema has brought out, to learn, to organize, to share, to build the community. And for us, that is very much the heart of what the project we do, Shangazi Power, is about. Sandra, Neema, asanteni sana. I'm really grateful for you guys taking your time, especially being on a Friday evening, and it was actually very short notice on my end, but I'd really like us to carry this conversation on further, even next week or in the near future, because there's really a broad aspect, as even Sandra has said. There's a broad aspect to this conversation. Thank you for sharing your lessons and even the limits of the works that you each do in your respective organizations, and really appreciate the honesty. Dr. Grace, I had also reached out to you. I'm grateful for seeing you listening in this conversation. Neema has really brought out very well. And as I had also chatted with her, that we'd like to also partner with KICTANET aside from this conversation and see what we can do, because I told them Mwanzo really likes working with women, especially on the grassroots levels. Just about our project Shangazi Power, and even on the broader aspect as a media house. Sandra, I really appreciate. I know Uganda, as I had said at the beginning before you had joined, there are very many restrictions and so many things happening, especially in the online and digital space in Uganda. But I really like how you stand firm and what you provide for opportunities that are there in her internet. And I'd also really like to explore that with you. To everyone who's joined, thank you for listening quietly and thank you for sharing this space. As I have said here at Mwanzo TV, this conversation is really part of the bigger journey. As we still continue documenting and amplifying the stories of these women in our region who are doing the heavy lifting, both online and offline, even from the women we've hosted on our Shangazi Power series, as I had mentioned, to the trainings we've done. I think I had mentioned earlier, we've done digital trainings on security. We've done digital trainings on mental health, because, with activism, it carries a whole load that you need to tackle one at a time. So even for such conversations, like spaces like this one, we are trying to hold a mirror to the realities of some of these things that these women are facing, and also, most importantly, to encourage the creativity that they bring to the fight. So we are looking forward to having this conversation broaden even in the next few weeks. But if you found this space useful, you can feel free, listen back to the recording. You can find it here on our Twitter page, that's Mwanzo TV, or also our YouTube page, where we have also been streaming live. Feel free to also share it with someone who you think or you feel they need to hear it. And don't forget to follow our speakers, Sandra and Neema, and the work that they're doing through her internet and KICTANET. They're all tagged on our platform. So we'll be tagging them. We'll be sharing snippets of this space as we go through. We'll also have an article on it. So I'll be sharing that in the course of the week, next week, and we'll be tagging you. Asanteni sana once more, Sandra, and her internet, and Neema and the whole of KICTANET. Thank you so much for enriching our discussion tonight. I want to wish all of you a lovely weekend and have a good night.